What if the person you trust the most, the person you've built a life with, is the very one that will take it from you? This is the tragic story of Fawziyah Javed, a woman whose life was stolen, not by an accident, but by the man she thought would protect her. A chilling murder disguised as an unfortunate fall. This is the heart-wrenching story that captivated not just her family, but the entire nation. Today, we delve deep into this tragedy and uncover the hidden layers of control, manipulation, and betrayal that led to her death. This case didn't just leave behind a grieving family. It sparked conversations about love, trust, and the dark side of relationships. This is the story of a woman who was about to bring new life into the world, but instead met an untimely and devastating end. Join us as we uncover the truth behind the shocking death of Fawziyah Javed, a death that was never just a fall. Before the world learned of her tragic death, Fawziyah Javed was just like any other woman, full of hopes and dreams. She was born and raised in a small town, a place where everyone knew each other. Fawziyah had always been known for her kind heart and positive attitude. She was someone who could light up a room with her presence. With a successful career and a beautiful family, her life seemed like a picture-perfect dream. Her family remembers her as a loving daughter, a devoted sister, and a friend who would go above and beyond for those she cared about. Fawziyah's dream was simple. She wanted to build a beautiful life with her husband, raise a family, and see her children grow. She had everything to look forward to, but that dream was cruelly shattered. Fawziyah had married Kashif Anwar, a man who, at first, seemed like the perfect partner. The couple shared a vision of a future together, one filled with happiness and joy. Fawziyah was not only excited about her marriage, but she was also expecting a child. At the time of her death, she was pregnant, a symbol of new beginnings, and yet it would also mark the end of her life. What everyone saw as a fairy tale marriage between Fawziyah and Kashif was in reality far from it. There were cracks, subtle signs that something wasn't right. Relationships are rarely as perfect as they seem from the outside, and Fawziyah's marriage to Kashif was no exception. While Fawziyah had built a life she could be proud of, her relationship with Kashif began to show signs of emotional strain. Kashif was controlling. Over time, this controlling behavior escalated into emotional abuse, a pattern that became harder and harder for Fawziyah to ignore. Those who were close to Fawziyah began to notice the subtle signs of distress. Her friends and family would recall moments when she seemed withdrawn, distant, and even fearful of her husband's reactions. Yet, she stayed. Why? Love or fear? It's a question that would only be answered after her tragic fall. The toxicity of Kashif's behavior grew over time. While on the surface he appeared calm and collected, behind closed doors, he had an intense need for control. His jealousy, possessiveness, and emotional manipulation were constant strains on their marriage. And, as is often the case with abusive relationships, these behaviors were hidden from the public eye. No one truly knew the depth of the emotional abuse Fawziyah was enduring until after it was too late. On the day Fawziyah died, she and Kashif made their way to a cliffside, a spot that had been a place of reflection for many. But on this day, it would be the place where her life came to an end. No one was present to witness what happened next, but the evidence gathered in the aftermath would tell a chilling tale. It is reported that Fawziyah and Kashif were in a heated argument before the fall. Friends and family later described Kashif as having a volatile temper, and this confrontation was only the latest in a long history of explosive fights. What began as a verbal altercation escalated, and before anyone knew it, Fawziyah was gone. As Fawziyah fell from the cliff, there was no one around to see the actual moment of the fall, but the series of events that led to it are clear. Witnesses who were in the vicinity later spoke about seeing Kashif standing alone near the edge, and Fawziyah nowhere to be seen. The scene was haunting. Was it an accident, or was it murder? In the aftermath of Fawziyah's death, the police began their investigation. The initial assumption by some was that it was a tragic accident, an unfortunate fall. But as investigators dug deeper, they began to see the signs that pointed to something far darker. Kashif's behavior after the incident only raised further suspicions. Instead of being devastated by his wife's death, his reactions were cold, distant, and unnervingly composed. He claimed that Fawziyah had simply fallen, but why did no one hear her scream? Why was there no evidence of any attempt to save her? The police began to uncover a troubling pattern of abusive behavior in their marriage. Friends and family came forward with disturbing accounts of Kashif's controlling nature. and how Fawziyah had become increasingly fearful in the days leading up to her death. Yet, in the face of mounting evidence, Kashif remained adamant that it was a tragic accident. As the investigation continued, the case took an even darker turn when Kashif was arrested and charged with Fawziyah's murder. The trial that followed would become a public spectacle, with emotions running high. The courtroom drama was intense, with the prosecution arguing that Fawziyah had been pushed off the cliff, while the defense maintained that it was simply a tragic accident. As the case unfolded, it became clear that the legal battle would be about more than just proving guilt or innocence. It would also shed light on the horrors of domestic abuse and the complexities of controlling relationships. The trial captivated the nation, drawing attention not only to the death of Fawziyah, but also to the broader issue of domestic violence. Domestic violence is a hidden epidemic, often shrouded in silence and shame. Fawziyah's case was no different. Her relationship with Kashif, while on the surface seemingly perfect, was deeply rooted in emotional abuse, manipulation, and control. Kashif used subtle yet devastating tactics to break down Fawziyah's sense of self-worth and ultimately her spirit. Psychologists believe that abusive relationships often follow a predictable pattern: the cycle of tension building, the explosive outbursts, followed by a honeymoon phase of apologies and promises. Fawziyah was trapped in this cycle. She felt both love and fear for her husband. This complexity is what makes leaving such a relationship so incredibly difficult. And for Fawziyah, it tragically led to her death. The psychological toll of abuse is real. And in cases like this, it is not just physical violence that causes harm, but emotional scars that last long after the bruises fade. Fawziyah's death became a rallying cry for domestic abuse survivors, activists, and the public at large. The case sparked outrage, and thousands of people, many of whom had never met Fawziyah, began demanding justice for her. In the end, the truth came out. Kashif Anwar was convicted of the murder of his wife, Fawziyah Javed. But while the conviction brought legal closure, it could never bring true peace to her family. Fawziyah's loved ones would never be the same, and the emotional scars from her loss would never fully heal. Fawziyah's family, though grateful for justice, still mourns her loss every day. Her death serves as a painful reminder of the dangers of hidden domestic abuse and the importance of recognizing the warning signs before it's too late. The story of Fawziyah Javed is one that we must continue to tell, not just because of the tragedy, but because of the lessons it offers. Domestic violence is real, and it can happen to anyone, but it doesn't have to be the end of the story. Fawziyah's legacy lives on in the voices of those who fight for justice, in the awareness raised about domestic abuse, and in the lives saved by those who refuse to stay silent. If you or someone you know is suffering in silence, remember, you don't have to face it alone.